By the rivers of Babylon, yeah, we sat down and we cried when we remembered Jerusalem. We were sick, Lord, near to dying.
Shalom, shalom, family. Welcome to another Bible review. My name is Uziah Lewy, one of the teachers of congregation D.C.B, CHOKMAH, BINAH. I'm also joined by my brother, Rabbi Chief Binyamin, who is also a teacher and a member of the congregation. We thank the Most High God this morning for life, food, clothing, and shelter, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. We ask Jehovah on this day that thou will look over us, that thou will watch, protect us, even guide our steps and our words, that thou would even cause the information that comes forth out of this gathering to be right and correct before you, and that in no way, shape, or form the public will be misguided by any of the information that is given on this platform. We ask that thou continue to bless us, be with those who are sick, be with those who are downtrodden, the sick, the fatherless, the widow. Continue to bless your people, Yisrael, scattered in the four corners of the earth, and continue to put within us the spirit of righteousness and of truth. We ask all this in our high, holy, divine name, Yehoshua. Hallelujah. Amen. Thank you all once again. Happy Hanukkah to everyone out there. As you see in the title, that we are having a discussion on Hanukkah today. If you refresh, you might have to refresh your titles to see that this is episode 41, and we are going to be talking about Hanukkah. So we thank all of you for joining us. We pray that the Creator of heaven and earth will continue to be with each and every one of you. Sorry for the late start, but I was pre-recording a show with Nasik Surishadai, and he ran a little overtime into the rabbi's time, so it's okay. When I used to record Nasik after the rabbi, he used to run into Nasik's time somehow. So we're going to try to get that straight now, because we know that this is a 9 o'clock start. So we're going to try to get that to 9 o'clock for us to begin at 9 o'clock. So we're glad that you're all here with us. Sister Abi, Quiana, Naomi Walter, okay, I see it's the same people. So, and Ba Hakohen Levi Yisrael Chava. Thank you all for joining us, and we pray that the Creator will continue to be with each and every one of you. So at this time, to open up the discussion on Hanukkah, I'm going to pass it on to my brother, Rabbi Chief Binyamin. How are you, Rabbi?
I'm good. Good morning to you. Shalom to you and everyone out there. Praise and honor to for all of our lives. Thank Him for strength, for good health, and the opportunity to discuss His word on this day, as He gives us the opportunity to do so week by week. So we are grateful to the Most High again for all that He does for us in allowing us this opportunity to, again, call upon His name. Also, at this time, just want to shout out, and I don't know if they're actually in the chat now or if they will come in later, but they can identify. I met two couples that mentioned that they do pay attention to this program every week. So, if they're out there, just giving them a shout out this morning as well, and just thanking everybody that continues to support, whether actively, when I say actively, like in the chat or, behind the scenes, because we know that this is something that reaches quite a few people, and, people do appreciate the opportunity that we provide in terms of offering the word of the Most High to everyone. So we definitely appreciate, again, everyone for joining us on a weekly basis in this this weekly journey, as we call it, as we discuss the words of the Most High every week. So the attempt is to do so every Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. We usually have a subject that is suggested by those that are watching. And sometimes we have subjects based on the time frame. So as it was mentioned, this is the season that is known as Hanukkah. So we are going to discuss Hanukkah. It is not a festival, a holy festival. Let me say, it's a festival, but it's not a holy festival designated by the Most High God. It's a festival that was designated based on a series of events that took place in history, which we will be talking about briefly. And I'll apologize in advance, and I'll explain further the apology when we get there. But with the extra time this morning, I personally didn't mind the late start. I know people out there did not want the late start, but it gave me an opportunity to try something new. So I apologize in advance because the new thing that I wanted to try, I didn't get an opportunity to finish. But maybe one day, based on time and as well as requests, we will finish it. So we're going to talk about again the history of Hanukkah. I'm just going to put up the screen at this time so we can share it for everybody. So this is going to be incomplete. So that's why I said I apologize in advance, because this will be incomplete. But again, we are talking about the history of the Hanukkah. Primarily, it revolves around the Maccabees. And we get the information from one of the books that was entered into the Apocrypha called First Maccabees and Second Maccabees. But for today, for our discussion, we're going to focus on First Maccabees chapters 1 through 4. That is, again, where our discussion is going to lead us today. So you have this overview of the Maccabees, First Maccabees, particularly chapters 1 through 4. Well, actually, the entire chapter, the entire book, but again, we're focusing on chapters 1 through 4, which should have been put in the notes as well. But for First Maccabees, it takes place during the time of King Antiochus IV of the Seleucid Empire, who sought to impose Hellenistic culture throughout his kingdom. And Hellenism is basically the national character or culture of Greece, especially ancient Greece. A lot of people hear that terminology, Hellenism, but again, just given the exact definition of what Hellenism actually is. So it's basically the promotion of the culture of Greece, or people imitating ancient Greece outside of the physical realm of the country itself. And Antiochus IV, and then we'll speak about him later on as we go on with our discussion. He instigates a severe persecution of the Israelites, attempted to suppress their Torah practices, enforcing Hellenism, and desecrating the temple in Jerusalem. This is one of the things that prompted the Maccabean revolt, the desecration of the temple, and also, as we were having our discussion, things hit close to home. And the history, centered around the courageous actions of the Maccabees, and this is said to mean hammer. Maccabee is said to mean hammer in Hebrew, or the variation of Hebrew during that time. That's not to say that that's direct. That's, again, a supposed definition or supposed meaning of Maccabee. So Maccabees in plural is talking about the entire Maccabean family. We hear primarily about Judah Maccabee, but it was an entire family that had to revolt, and it didn't start with him. It started with his father, which we'll get into just now as well. And the Maccabees were able to achieve significant military victories. They liberated Jerusalem, and they rededicated the desecrated house of God. So that, again, the house of God was desecrated, and they had an opportunity to rededicate the house This rededication is commemorating the festival, which is known as Hanukkah, as it's pronounced in English, or Hanukkah, given that guttural sound in the beginning of the pronunciation, and Hanukkah means dedication in the Hebrew language. And the successful revolt, it resulted in the establishment of the Hasmonean dynasty. So you hear about the Hasmoneans, throughout history. Basically, the Hasmonean family, or the Hasmonean dynasty, started with the Maccabean family, and the revolt that they were able to, the revolts, I should say, because it was, a series of revolts throughout the territory of Israel that they were able to accomplish. And as a result of that, they were able to establish what is known as the Hasmonean dynasty, where they had political as well as spiritual rule. That family itself has political and spiritual rule over the nation of Israel. So that you'll hear about high priests coming out of the Hasmonean dynasty. You'll hear about kings themselves coming out of they wouldn't call them kings, at that period of time, because of, the title king was suppressed, especially after the time of the Babylonians, because once, you had Babylon, then you had the Medes, and you had the Persians, you had the Greeks, who were actually in charge of not just Israel, but the territories, what is known as the Middle East, that they were not allowing people to call themselves kings over their own kingdoms. So the Hasmonean, they would basically take the place of what a king would be for Israel, but they were not literally known as kings outside of the realm of Israel. And an important timeline is circa 171 to 165 BCE. Remember that as we go throughout our discussion, that timeline is very important, especially if we get to discuss further what took place during the time. So that's where we'll stop. Not the overall presentation, but that's where we'll stop. Well, stopping the presentation, but we'll continue on with our discussion. So we're going to go into the book of First Maccabees, and we're not going to read everything in its entirety. You could always go into videos, and I'm pretty sure Chief Uziel will post individual videos of his teaching of the book of Maccabees, chapters 1 through 4. He does it every year. So we're just going to go do an overview of these chapters, because again, when we have our discussions each week, we try to stay within the time frame of 20 minutes to half an hour of the topic of the day, and then leave the remaining time of the hour for discussion. But as mentioned last week, the discussion itself of the entire of what we're going to get into might take more than the 30 minutes. So hopefully everybody that's listening does not mind as we do that, because again, there is, it's 4 chapters, but these chapters in the book of Maccabees are pretty lengthy. So as we go into our discussion, just going to highlight certain parts, certain verses within these 4 chapters, but try to get through as swift as possible, and then, go back and discuss certain things. So it talks about in the book of Maccabees, First Maccabees chapter 1, it occurred after Alexander, king of Macedonia, defeated Darius, king of Persia, that he ruled in his place. So we see that this history is taking place sometime after what we read in the Tanakh. We know that the Tanakh ends with the book, historically ends with the book of Nehemiah. So after a period of time, right after that, you had Darius, who was the king of Persia, because again, the book of Nehemiah ends with the Persians being in control of the entire region. So again, the succession of power was Babylon, then it was the Medes, then it was the Persians, then it was the Greeks. And that succession of kingdoms is also very important for us to know. So if we get into that part of the discussion later on, just remember those 4 kingdoms: Babylon, the Medes, Persia, and the Greeks. So right after the Persians came the Greeks. There's Alexander, who the world knows, we learn in history in the United States. Not just, and I'm pretty sure not just the United States, but around the world. He's known as Alexander the Great, who was a conqueror, who was able to basically bring a lot of nations under the Greek rule. So what he did at that time was, again, he waged many wars. He went forth and, fought many battles and was able to defeat many territories, the kingdoms that were already under under the Persians. He was able to subject to be under, the Grecian rule. So he is Alexander, son of Philip, that came from the land of the Kittim and ruled firstly in the land of Greece, and he fought a lot of battles and took almost all the strongholds and slew almost all the kings of the earth and went through the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him. Whereupon he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. And he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. And after these things he fell sick and perceived that he would die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. So after he died, and it says, so Alexander reigned 12 years and then he died. So after he died, there were many generals, there were many provinces that he set up. After a period of time, it dwindled down to 4, but it was many. The exact number I don't remember at this time, but if you look up what is known as the Diadochi was the group of kingdoms that Alexander set up after he died. Now, all of those generals, all of those people started warring with one another. They started fighting with one another, as it mentioned in verse 10, and his servants bare rule, every one in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. So again, after Alexander, after the Diadochi, then after a while, you had 4. It dwindled down to 4 because everybody was fighting with each other. And then when it dwindled down to 4, these 4 kingdoms, primarily we're going to talk about the Seleucid kingdom, which reigned under Seleucus the first, and you'll hear about Ptolemy the first, who had the Ptolemaic kingdom as well. And the Seleucids reigned over Syria, and Seleucids reigned over Syria and some of the neighboring territories, and Ptolemy had Egypt. And that was the agreement that they had. So you had, again, you was 4 kingdoms, but we're focusing primarily on the 2. And that actually we're going to focus on talking about the 1. So verse 12, and then after speaking about him, then we're going to jump through a little bit after that. So you had, and there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage at Rome. And this is Antiochus the fourth that we're speaking about right here. So this is after a succession of time. So this is well after Alexander lived and died and did everything he did, everything after Diadochi, everything after that, after Seleucid the first, and all of the people that came after Seleucid the first in the Seleucid kingdom. Now you have Antiochus the fourth. Again, if the presentation was done completely, you would have been able to see the exact succession of the kings all the way down. But again, we're focusing on Antiochus the fourth when we're having our discussion. And he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. So some of these years, again, these years are very important for us to pay attention to. So you have the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. And as it goes on, so now Antiochus the fourth, he's the one that is known, because now we're going to just, again, skip through. And again, for reference, you'll be able to go through, go to Chief Uziel's explanation of the book of First Maccabees, chapters 1 through 4, where he gives everything in more detail. So again, at this time, we are just focusing on highlighting certain points, but not going through everything in detail. So Antiochus the fourth, what he did, he had wars with Ptolemy, or the Ptolemaic, not Ptolemy the first, but Ptolemy that was in power at that time when he was reigning. So they had wars amongst each other. And one of the battles, he lost and he got angry. He took his anger out on the nation of Israel, went in, and this is another verse and another year to also take note of. In verse 22, he returned again in the 140th 133rd year. So we had the 137th years when he began to reign. Then you have the 143rd years when he went into Jerusalem, and he entered proudly into the sanctuary and took away the golden altar and the candlestick of light and the vessel thereof and the table of the showbread and the pouring vessels and the vials and the censer of gold and the veil and the crown and the golden ornaments that were before the temple, all which he pulled off. So again, this was all done in the 143rd year of his reign, another year again to take notice of. And again, he did a lot of damage. He basically, the following verses talk about basically the Hellenism that he instituted within among the nation of Israel. And in verse 30, and after 2 years for they expired, the king sent his chief collector of tribute unto the cities of Judah, who came into Jerusalem with a great multitude, and they spake peaceably words unto them, but all with deceit. So he went in, again, this is 2 years after the 143rd year. So now we're in the 145th year of his reign, where he went in with deceit. But again, he went into the nation of Israel, primarily into Jerusalem, and he destroyed the people again. During that time, he built garrisons. So when they said they built it, they then built the city of David with a great and strong wall and with mighty towers and made a stronghold for them. This is basically where they utilized Jerusalem as a garrison for their kingdom. Again, this is talking about Antiochus IV. And as we go down, it talks about how the people were mourning and the people were crying based on the type of things that were taking place here. And verse 39, her sanctuary was laid waste. Like a wilderness, her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into reproach, her honor into contempt. So again, this is talking about what was taking place in the nation of Israel. And as we continue to go on, the part of the Hellenistic practices is that Torah practice was forbidden. So the children of Israel were not allowed to keep the Sabbath day. They were enjoined to profane the Sabbath day. You read about within this chapter where there were people that were circumcised and uncircumcised themselves and uncircumcised their children, and where circumcision itself was prohibited. And again, this is all of the practices that were done. Verse 53 is also another important verse. So now the 15th day of the month Kislev, which is the month that we are in now in the Hebrew calendar, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar and built idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side. That verse, again, is very important. The 145th year, this is 2 years after, again, when he first entered in and to do his damage. And also he set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar. And most people say that what he did during this time was set up an altar as well as an idol to Zeus, who was the main god. If you know about Greek mythology, Zeus was the main god of the Greeks during this time. So he set up that idol, which is known as the abomination of desolation, in Jerusalem, in the temple, or in the courtyard of the temple in the Most High. So that's what was done here during this time. And it was done on the 25th day of the month Kislev, or which is the 9th month on the Hebrew calendar. So again, in verse 57, now the 5 and 25th day of the month, they did sacrifice upon the idol altar, which was upon the altar of God. Again, this is talking about the Seleucid army, or the Seleucid people coming in and started doing all these things. And they started going throughout Israel and doing a lot of damage, a lot of hurtful things, as we said in verse 59, and they hanged the infants about their necks and rifled their houses and slew them that had circumcised themselves. So they were basically going throughout the territory of Israel to see who was keeping Torah, and they basically executed people for keeping the law of Jehovah God. So in chapter 2, it talks about Mattathias. Again, when you read in here, because most of the English translations that you read of the book of First Maccabees, and primarily a lot of the Apocrypha, comes from Greek translations. So where you'll see Mattathias is actually Mattathias in Hebrew. Judas was actually Judah. Where you see Maccabees is actually, Maccabee. And so Mattathias, he was in a town called Modin, And again, the Seleucid army was going all throughout the territory of Israel where people were living, and forcing people to sacrifice to false gods and forcing people to break Torah. So now when it got close to home and the Seleucid army got to this town called Modin where Mattathias was, that once it came to their doorstep and they were being forced to do something about it, that's where the revolt started. So Mattathias is the one that actually started the revolt against the Seleucid army, and it was continued by his son Judah. Now, if you ever hear Chief Lucio teach about this chapter in particular, you'll read that when the Seleucid army came in and they were forcing people to do things such as, again, eat unclean meat, worship a false god, sacrifice on the altar to a false god, that there was one in particular that wanted to partake in the Hellenism that was happening. So actually what Mattathias did was slay that individual. And then as a result of that, because that was done, they had to basically slay all the Greeks that were there at that time, because now they were already in the war. So that's how the revolt started. They went through, they killed a lot of people, but now word goes out that there was a revolt that took place in Modin. So now the family, the family of Mattathias had to actually flee Modin, and a lot of people, basically everybody that was living in that town had to flee Modin. But in the process of time, they were forcing other Israelites to actually keep Torah, because now that they're in the battle and that now that the revolt started, they have to make sure that they get all of the troops together. So they basically riled everybody up, and they basically forced people that was, falling into Hellenism to go back into Torah. So they started doing things such as keeping the Sabbath day holy, making sure people that were not circumcised were circumcised, making sure that they brought them into the covenant. But they also at the same time had to take care of many families along the way. So that is what again, a brief overview of chapter 2. But also what happens in chapter 2, by the end of it, then you have the death of Mattathias. Well, basically what he did was confer the revolt to his sons. Many people speak primarily of Judah Maccabee because, again, in the history of itself, it focuses around Judah Maccabee himself, because he's the one that is the general of the army. His father put him in charge of the battles and in charge of the political scene of it. But again, he also put in charge his other son, which is the brother of, as you see in verse 67. And this is the father Mattathias speaking. And behold, I know that your brother Simon, which is Shimon in Hebrew, is a man of counsel. Give ear unto him always. He shall be a father unto you. So when you look at that verse, technically, Shimon was the leader of the family at this time. Is that as Mattathias knew that his son Judah was the one that was capable for battle. So you had one that was in charge of the spiritual aspects, and then one that was in charge of the military aspects. So again, the narrative focuses on Judah because the narrative overall is talking about the rededication of the house of God that eventually takes place. But again, Shimon, or Simon, as is said here, he's actually a father to everybody. So he's the one that everybody would go to for counsel, go to for judgment, go to for information. But Judah is the one that is the general of the army. So again, the narrative focuses around him. Chapter 3 continues to talk about more of the courageous acts, more of the battles, more of the revolt that took place between the Seleucid army and the children of Israel, who was led again by Judah Maccabee, and the various battles that took place. Even within that, because again, they were able to galvanize the people together, but the people were galvanized in different territories. So, but everybody was still strong. Everybody, once they knew that this revolt was taking place, everybody strengthened themselves and they wanted to take part. So there was a period of time where you had a group of people that kept themselves together and it was a Sabbath day, and the Seleucid army came forth to fight against them. And this particular group of people said that they were not going to fight because it was the Sabbath day. And the Seleucid army took advantage of that, and they overtook that group of Israelites that wouldn't defend themselves on the Sabbath day. So when that word reached Judah Maccabee, and those that were with him in that group, they heard about what happened, so they had to make a covenant amongst themselves. They had to, it was a decision that they had to make. And even though Shimon is not directly mentioned, but again, being that Shimon was as the counselor of everybody and as a father to everybody, this was they took counsel together, prayed to the Most High, they fasted and did all of these things in order to decide what they're going to do moving forward. Because what they realized is that if the Seleucid army started to realize that all they had to do was start attacking them on the Sabbath day, then the Seleucid army would be able to win. So what they did was make an agreement that they would, defend themselves on the Sabbath day. So that is how the battle was able to, or these battles were able to continue. And the children of Israel were victorious throughout all of these battles against all of the generals. You read about particularly like Lysias, in this chapter. But Judah Maccabee, and there were other wars again that was taking place throughout the territory of Israel. But again, the narrative focuses around the Maccabees themselves. But when they started that revolt, they basically instituted pride amongst the children of Israel. So in other places, people were able to fight. So when the word also went around that they were basically saying, we took counsel, we prayed, we fasted, that we're going to defend ourselves on the Sabbath day, everybody else in the other territories got that word as well. So the Seleucid army going into the territory of Israel basically had no wins at this time, because the children of Israel were fighting for, literally their lives, and fighting for the name of Yisrael, and fighting with the protection of the Most High upon them, praying constantly and fasting constantly. It was not something that was done just for the sake of themselves, but something that was done for the pride of the nation, and also for the pride in keeping Torah that took place. And again, chapter 3 is talking about the various battles that took place, and also some of the things that they saw along the way when they started, going through various territories, to see the destruction, see how Hellenism itself, it's not termed Hellenism at this time. We don't read that term within the narrative, but they saw how various things were taking place. So at some point they got into Jerusalem. They were able to, just going back a little bit, they were able to get into Jerusalem, because this chapter 4 is where we actually get the real discussion about Hanukkah. But as they got into Jerusalem, just to get into was the end of it, where they saw that the temple was destroyed. I'll just read from verse 49. They brought also the priest's garments and the first fruits and tithes, and the Nazarites they stirred up, who had accomplished their days. They cried there with a loud voice toward heaven, saying, what shall we do with these, and whither shall we carry them away? For thy sanctuary is trodden down and profaned, and thy priests are in heaviness and brought low. And lo, the heathen are assembled together against us to destroy us. What things they imagine against us, thou knowest. How shall we be able to stand against them, except thou, O God, be our help? And this is, again, one of the final, this is the battle for, as they get into Jerusalem. And as it says in the end of chapter 3, nevertheless, as the will of God is in heaven, so let him do. So again, chapter 4 now talks about this great battle that took place between the Maccabean family, the rest of the children of Israel that stirred themselves up to fight against the Seleucid army. So as the narrative, as you will read, they were victorious in battle, and they sent the Seleucid army away. So we'll start from verse 22. Actually, verse 21. After this, they went home and sung a song of thanksgiving and praise Jehovah in heaven. Again, we don't see the name of God within the book of Maccabees. You don't see the word of God specifically in the book of Maccabees, but we know that Jehovah God is present all throughout. When you read this and you see how they were able to be delivered, you see how it was taking place. Because it is good, because his mercy endures forever. Thus Israel had a great deliverance that day. Now all the strangers that had escaped came and told Lysias what had happened. who, when he heard thereof, was confounded and discouraged, because neither such things as he would were done unto Israel, nor such things as the king commanded him were come to pass. Because again, now he's worried about his own life. Once again, this is one of the generals of the Seleucid army, and he's taking all of these losses, and he has to try to figure out how he's going to go back to Antiochus IV and tell him that he lost. And he tried to go up against him again. So every time he went against him, he lost the battle. And so now in this final battle in Jerusalem itself, when he tried to go against the children of Israel again, he lost. Now we're going to speak about primarily what they did to cleanse the temple. And this is where it got into the discussion of Hanukkah itself. So after this battle with Lysias, now when Lysias saw his army put to flight and the manliness of the Judah soldiers, and how they were ready how they were ready either to live or die valiantly, he went to Antiochia, and gathered together a company of strangers, and having made his army greater than it was, he proposed to come again into Judea. Then said Judah and his brethren, behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and dedicate the temple. So while they were going away to try to muster, while the Seleucid army was going away to now muster up more troops, and now that the children of Israel were able to take control of Jerusalem and take control of the temple, they had a little peace. So they said, behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary. Upon this, all the hosts assembled themselves together and went up into Mount Zion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate and the altar profaned and the gates burned up and shrubs growing in the courts as in the forest, or in one of the mountains, yea, in the priest's chambers pulled down, they rent their clothes and made great lamentation, and cast ashes upon their heads, and fell down flat to the ground upon their faces, and blew an alarm with the trumpets, and cried toward heaven. Then Judah appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until he had cleansed the sanctuary. Remember, this was still a garrison, so there was some of the Seleucid army just penned up within Jerusalem. So Judah Maccabee said, just clear out everybody that was not Israel. So he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law, who cleanse the sanctuary and bear out the defiled stones into an unclean place. So that's, it's important for us to maintain a level of cleanliness and holiness about us, because we never know when we're going to be utilized for those clean and holy actions. So again, he was able to find priests of blameless conversation, people that were upright in their conversation and who loved the law, who loved Torah, and he chose them to go forth. Because again, he was the general of the army. He's out there killing people. Everybody else along in the army was killing people. So he had to find people that had clean conversation and clean hands, that were holy in their actions and in their conversation, to go forth to purify the temple. And as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which profane, they thought it best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down. So again, this is the altar that was again in the courtyard of the house of God, the altar of whole stones. But because it was defiled by the unclean meat that was sacrificed on it to the Greek god Zeus, again, we read about that in the first chapter, that they decided to put those stones away and set up a new altar, and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them. Because again, they didn't just completely destroy it, because at one point it was holy, but they didn't completely destroy it, but they weren't going to use it either. And they took whole stones according to the law and built a new altar according to the former, and made it the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple and hollowed the courts. They made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick and the altar of burnt offerings and of incense and the table. And upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table and spread out the veils, and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 5th and 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Kislev, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it. Even in that was it dedicated with songs, cisterns, and harps and cymbals. Again, when you remember in chapter 1, it was on the 25th day of the 9th month that the abomination of desolation was set up, and to where they sacrificed the unclean meat upon the altar of God, and they desecrated the entire temple. So now it's also on the 25th day in the 9th month, now in the 140th year, 148th year, that all this is taking place. So again, as we mentioned earlier, that these were things to remember. The 25th day of the first month, and also the particular years, and so again, time permitting, we'll get into that as well. So it continues on with saying, then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the God of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days and offered burnt offerings with gladness and the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold, and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed and hanged doors upon them. Thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judah and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month Kislev with mirth and gladness. At that time also they built up the Mount Zion with high walls and strong towers round about, lest the Gentiles should come and tread it down as they had done before. And they set there a garrison to keep in a fortified Beit Surah, to preserve it, that the people might have a defense against Edomia. Because again, the Edomites were also joining forces with the Seleucid army to fight against the children of Israel. So what's important here as we start to wrap up the verse 57, moreover, Judah and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month Kislev with mirth and gladness. So Hanukkah, again, is not just about, actually, no, it's not about just what we see it being done today by other people, where it's gift giving, festival of lights, and those aspects that is brought, but it's actually a day of remembrance. But it's being remembered with mirth and gladness, but it's a day of remembrance of the dedication of the house of God, and also commemorating the lives that were lost along the way as the children of Israel were fighting against the Seleucid army, the Greek army, from that point even up until now. And from the desecration of the house of God to now what is known as the rededication of the house of God, the rededication or the dedication of a new altar. So you have the dedication of a new altar, the rededication of the entire house was done at this time. So this day or this season that is being honored, there's nothing wrong with acknowledging it, because again, Judah Maccabee, this is a part of the history of the children of Israel. So throughout history, the children of Israel were acknowledging this season as a season of remembrance and a season of mirth and gladness for the fact that Judah Maccabee, all of the Maccabees were able to fight up the Seleucid army for a period of time and rededicate the house of the Most High God. So again, that is just a brief history of the first 4 chapters of the book of Maccabees and of the Hanukkah season. There's a few more things that we can discuss shortly, but with the time that's remaining, just going to leave it up for comments and any questions that people may have at this time.
Yeah, I see a question here. From things they don't discuss in church, how could the Maccabees be king and priest when that's 2 different bloodlines, same as David's sons? 2 Samuel 8:18.
So in 2 Samuel chapter 8, verse 18, if that's the verse where it mentions that David's sons were in the Hebrew language, it mentions that they are Kohanim. And it probably does, but there's other verses that mention that as well, that David's sons were Kohanim. A Kohen, the literal translation for Kohen is minister. So it's not a term that is just specific to the sons of Aaron. Yeah, so that is the verse. So I'll actually put it so that way people can see it. So when it comes to the question that is being asked, people can understand where that question came from. So in 2 Samuel chapter 8, verse 18, with this chapter is talking about many of what we know today as the cabinet of King David. You know, his advisors, his counselors, his generals, and also his sons, the scribes, and various people that were part of his cabinet. So in verse 18, it said, and Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was over the Kerethites and the Pelethites, and David's sons were chief ministers. So that's the translation that's given here. Kohanim is the word in Hebrew, but a Kohen, literally when you get the translation, maybe it'll pop up on the right-hand side. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But I could always go over to, so there it is. Kohen, the primary definition that we know is priest, but also a principal officer or chief ruler. So that is the definition of a Kohen. So Kohen is a minister for, just to use another term. So you had the ministers that were of the line of Aaron, where in English we would utilize the term priest because they were ministering directly between Jehovah God and the people. And then when it comes to King David's sons, who were also ministers, they ministered between King David and the people on a political level. So that word is not relegated just to the priest of the spiritual nature, but any minister. That's what the word Kohen means. It means a minister. And the families that are doing it, then you were getting the context of what they're doing. So now when it comes to the Maccabees of the Hasmonean dynasty, what they did was basically, after a period of time, being that they took control, this would be those that came after that. They looked at it, okay, it was our family that put out their necks on the line to fight against the Greeks, and we did all this, a lot of stuff after Judah Maccabee. When you continue to read the book of Maccabee, you see some mistakes that were made even during Judah's time and even afterwards. And the family, overall wasn't that. Even when you read in the book of Josephus, you'll see other things that were done that were just not so good. And while the children of Israel eventually went into captivity anyway. So it started off very good, but a lot of mistakes were made along the way. So in terms of them taking over both, the political and spiritual aspect, is not that was supposed to be done, but throughout a period of time that ended up being done. That's
that was
what happened.
The least of their problems anyway.
Yeah.
Z. Binyamin, is it a bad thing to not acknowledge the festive time due to the Hellenized traditions tied to it today, and also seeing that it isn't in Vayikra 23?
So the festival of Hanukkah is actually an anti-Hellenism festival.
Right.
That is basically to celebrate a release from Hellenism. Because when you get to that verse that we read in 57 in 4th Maccabees, where it talks about they instituted that season as a season of joy, of mirth and gladness, because they were able to get a reprieve from the Seleucid army that was fighting against them, and they were able to, because again, that's why it's not to be celebrated the way, again, that people may see it being celebrated commercially. It was not intended by the Maccabees or any of the children of Israel to be a commercial, quote unquote, holiday. It was a celebration of the dedication of the altar for 8 days. Again, we don't read in here where you had the cruise of oil. That again, that's one of the legends, that there was a cruise of oil that was supposed to last for 1 day, and it kept the fire on the menorah burning for 8 days. And that's why, according to the legend, there were 8 days, but it doesn't specify that there. There was a reprieve for a period of time, 8 of those, days of the dedication that they cleansed the temple, celebrated. They were joyful for those 8 days. And I'm definitely more than 8 days, but for the space of those 8 days, they said that, we're going to do this from year to year. So the children of Israel that specified that. So it's not a holy day whatsoever, not a day to, that people could say, well, don't go to work, don't go to school, or anything like that. It's a day of remembrance. It's just like, many countries, the United States, they always talk about remember the Alamo, remember 9/11. So, just to give it a comparison, and then Jewish people, talk about remember the Holocaust. A lot of nations remember certain things in their history and how they were able to overcome obstacles and overcome enemies. So this is basically a day that is commemorated to that the children of Israel were able to overcome enemies.
Right.
It became commercialized by other nations. So that's why I know amongst the children of Israel, it's a day that is frowned upon because of how other nations keep it and how it's become commercialized. But when we read the actual history, it's a commemoration of the house of the Most High. And again, it's about the battles that took place. So people died. People died on the Sabbath day because they didn't want to fight. People died just fighting, on the other days of the week. A lot of blood was shed. We read about Judah Maccabee, surviving and, particular people among him surviving, but a lot of lives were lost trying to fight against Hellenism. So in short, Hanukkah is actually an anti-Hellenism festival.
Right. Also, I read, Sister Avi, should Israelites refer, this is going to take us to something different, should Israelites refer to ourselves as Jews?
So there's a difference between the term Jew and Jewish. Primarily, the term Jew referred to the tribe of Judah. It became a shortened form. When you read throughout the Tanakh in the Hebrew, you will see the Hebrew word Yehudim when it referred to the children of Israel, because the southern kingdom, because again, the kingdom or the nation of Israel split into 2 kingdoms. So just giving a long answer to that question. So the nation of Israel split into 2 kingdoms. The southern kingdom, which was led by the tribe of Judah, but they also had other tribes among them. As a group of people, they were known as Yehudim, even though everybody was not of the tribe of Judah. Just like in the book of Esther, Mordecai, who was of the tribe, it says, he's of the tribe of Binyamin, that he was referred to as a Jew. He was referred to as a Judean. So, the original term of Jew would actually be referred to a Judean or someone that lived in the territory of Judea, when Judea became, was known as the southern territory or the southern kingdom of the children of Israel. So in terms of just using the term Jew, it's not, I'm just giving my opinion now. I'm not anti-Israel. The focus should be on us calling ourselves the children of Israel, using the term Israel, using terms such as Hebrew, which we also read. But again, we do read where the children of Israel, after the split of the kingdom, refer to themselves as what we would know today as Judeans, and in English they just shorten it to the word Jew. So it's not sacrilegious to use the term Jew. There were more preferred words, of course. Again, in Israel, Hebrew, those are more preferred words, because again, the nation is actually known as the nation of Israel, and as we're coming together, we're not supposed to be considered split, because the Most High, especially in Ezekiel chapter 37, he said he's going to bring a stick of Judah together with the stick of Ephraim, and we will be one nation in his hand once again. So those terminologies that we use that were actually divisive amongst ourselves, we have to get rid of them. But again, it's not sacrilegious to utilize that term, because that portion of the nation of Israel became known as Judeans, or later on Jews.
Hallelujah. Also, what I see here, when you look at the second book of Maccabees, chapter 10, the celebration also was a commemoration of the time of the Feast of Booths, because for 2 years they have been wandering in the wilderness, and they could not celebrate the Feast of Booths. So a lot of what we see, the 8th day celebration, that has to do with the Feast of Booths and Shemini Atzeret, from what I understand. Can you go to the second book of Maccabees, chapter 10? I'm not sure if this has a second book of Maccabees. It might not.
No, I think it does. Second Maccabees, chapter 10. Let me just do the English only translation. Well, actually, it's switching between English and Hebrew for some reason for this translation. Let me use another translation. And that's the only translation that's available. He said, what chapter? Yeah, chapter 10. Yeah, we're in chapter 10.
There's another apocrypha, 25th day. I think I could read it from.
Yeah, this version is given a majority of the chapter in Hebrew.
In Hebrew. All right, so I'm going to read it from. I have the New Oxford Annotated Bible with New Revised Standard Version with the Apocrypha. So it reads, this goes into a little bit more detail from what we read in the first four. So sometimes I read Second Maccabees to get more of the detail of what was happening during that time. So actually, during the Hellenization and when they took over the city of Jerusalem, which is the city of David, and they took over the temple, they began to build precincts within Jerusalem, outposts. They began to watch towers, and what they began to do is they began to have sex with prostitutes to desecrate that whole region around the temple and within the temple. That's also one thing that the first Maccabees, it's almost like a synopsis of everything that really happened. Like there's more detail to a lot of the things that were happening. And the Hellenization of us, the Hellenization had to do with more than just them wanting us to worship their gods. Like the rabbi explained, it had to do also with the way that we clothe ourselves, the hats that we wore. It was a bunch of things that they wanted us to do in order to become Hellenized or to become Greek, as for lack of a better word. One of the things about Alexander the Great was that, and why he got to conquer and got to go so far, is because when he came to the gates of your city, he allowed you to keep your religion, your quote-unquote religion. So when he allowed you to keep your religion, it gave the people's morale did not fall. This is why during this time also Antiochus was having problems with people paying him taxes because he was taking away people's way of life. So now you're an emperor, like the chief rabbi explained, you're not allowed to have kings anymore because he's the emperor of this empire. So you have governors, you have people that are watching over all these different places that would at one point have kings, but you're not allowing people to worship their gods. So there were a lot of revolts. We read about the Maccabean revolt and the Hasmonean dynasty, but there were revolts in Persia. There were revolts all over Egypt. If you read the history, there were revolts all over the place because of his standard and what he was trying to implement on the people. So I went into a diatribe because I just got a lot of information on this, but we're not trying to stretch this out. So, 2 Maccabees chapter 10. Now Maccabees and his followers, the Lord leading them on, recovered the temple and the city. Verse 2, they tore down the altars that had been built in the public square by the foreigners, and also destroyed the sacred precincts. Remember I was telling you about the precincts? The sacred precincts is where they were having sex with the prostitutes to desecrate the whole temple site, inside the temple and outside the temple. They purify, and they were also doing offerings not only to Zeus, but to Dionysus, which is the goddess of fertility in Greece. She's the goddess of fertility. She's the goddess of a lot of things, but this is the celebration, and this is part of it. And there's a whole celebration that comes around this time of the year during the winter solstice, and that was actually the celebration that they were having for her as to why they were doing the sacrifices with the swine's flesh that they wanted us to partake of. They purified the sanctuary and made another altar of sacrifice. Then, striking fire out of flint, they offered sacrifices after a lapse of 2 years, and they offered incense and lighted lamps and set out the bread of the presence. So, you know, they set up the menorah, the showbread table, and the showbread, which sit opposite of each other in the temple. And then we have the veil, you know, with the holies of holies. So they set all this up. This is after they recaptured the temple. Verse 4, when they had done this, they fell prostrate and implored the Lord that they might never again fall into such misfortunes, but that if they should ever sin, they might be disciplined by him with forbearance and not be handed over to blasphemous, barbarous nations. So they actually pleaded to God that if they ever sin again, please not to hand them over to nations that will cause them to forsake him, Yehovah. Verse 5, it happened that on the same day on which the sanctuary had been profaned by the foreigners, the purification of the sanctuary took place. So on the 25th of Kislev, it was desecrated. On the 25th, it was rededicated, or it was dedicated back again. That is, on the 25th day of the same month, which is Kislev. They celebrated it for 8 days with rejoicing. And this is the part that I wanted to get to. In the manner of the festival of booths, remembering how, not long before, during the festival of booths, they had been wandering in the mountains and caves like wild animals. So they couldn't even keep the festival of booths because they was in caves and in the wilderness wandering like wild animals. So they remembered the festival of booths. Therefore, carrying ivy-wreathed wands and beautiful branches and also fronds of palm, they offered hymns and thanksgiving to him who had given success to the purifying of his own holy place. They decreed by public edict, ratified by vote, that the whole nation of Yehudi, remember at that time, why they're saying the word Jews is because what we know as the southern kingdom of Judah was known as Judea during that time. And the northern kingdom of Israel was known as Samaria. So there was still a northern and a southern kingdom, but it was just known as Judea at that time, which means Judah, and Samaria, which is a name that was put in there for the Samaritans and the people that were put there during the time of the Medo-Persian Empire, I believe, or no, it was the Assyrians. But the rabbi could correct me on that because my history might be a little bit fuzzy on that. They decreed by public edict, ratified by vote, that the whole nation of Jews should observe these days every year. Such thing was the end of the Antiochus, who was called Epiphanes. So Antiochus, Epiphanes, which means God manifest. Antiochus meaning needing no help. So he's God manifest and he needs no help, right? So this is some of the things that it's a little something that I wanted to add to it as to why we might be celebrating 8 days. What do you think about that, Rabbi?
Yeah, I don't know exactly why. I didn't study the second Maccabees itself,
Right.
but we know that
It's 8 days.
it's 8 days according to that, and there's a legend that goes along with it. But I know that legend is specified a little bit more in other history.
Right.
But in terms of the historical aspect of, First Maccabees, when given an overview of everything, First Maccabees is a historical account of events, and Second Maccabees is a retelling of those events, but from a spiritual point of view and giving insight in terms of the feeling of the people. It does have some connotation of foreign ideals in it, because again, and remember, the children of
Right.
Israel went through Babylon, went through the
Absolutely.
Medes, went through Persia.
Absolutely.
So even though they're fighting against the Greeks, they already have been through 3 kingdoms already that have influenced them. So
Heavily.
when reading the book of Second Maccabees, you'll see some of that Babylonian influence in the people. So the people are fighting against one nation, but you have generations of other cultures already within them. But they already knew
Influence.
that the Greeks was wrong, but generations have been living again under Babylon, the Medes, and Persia. So you'll see some things that are questionable, but just understand it from that perspective, that the children of Israel were living through other nations and other cultures even before reaching to that point.
Yeah, like the whole reefs. Like, I don't think that was something that we were doing. You know, it seemed like the evergreen, it was like an evergreen type reef type thing. We know that that comes from also from the culture of the Romans and the Greeks, because they brought these things into. That's the whole beginning of the whole the Christmas. You know, when you add to the Christmas story as to why they brought evergreen reefs and Christmas and what we call Christmas trees today, but evergreens into the homes. It was because they believed in ancient times that the evergreen tree warded off evil spirits because it didn't die through the winter. Everything else died except that. So they thought that it had some type of magical powers, and that it warded off evil spirits. So we see a lot of the things begin to seep through our society. Here we have did Antiochus Epiphanes fulfill the abomination of desolation prophesied by Daniel? I know you have a take on this, so
Yes,
I'll let
so
you answer.
the answer is yes. So when going through the discussion, and when certain dates and certain timelines were mentioned, and it said, it was mentioned to take note of it, is because that was going to lead into that. We didn't get to that point. But again, we wanted to focus today primarily on the Hanukkah celebration, but yes, the book of Daniel points directly to this point in time. I'll just give a short answer. If there's a request for further explanation in upcoming weeks, we can do so. But the book of Daniel, chapter 9, it's also in chapter 8 and in chapter 12. So in chapter 9, where it says, again, this is talking about the 70 weeks in this chapter, but just to answer the question and focusing on the final week. And after 62 weeks, shall an anointed one be cut off and be no more, and the people of a prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, but his end shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. The term desolation, abomination, detestable thing appears many times between Daniel's chapter 8 and chapter 12. And that's why specifically when we read in the book of First Maccabees, it mentioned that that idol that was set up was called the abomination of desolation. And verse 27 of chapter 9 of Daniel says, and he shall make a firm covenant with many for 1 week. We read where in the book of First Maccabees where King Antiochus came in, and he came in with deceit, trying to, appease the people, but he only came with more wrath. And for half of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and offering to cease, and upon the wing of detestable things shall be that which causeth appallment, which again is the abomination of desolation. That's what caused the appallment. That's what caused people to eventually be fed up. And that until the extermination, wholly determined, be poured out upon that which caused appallment. So the 70 weeks are actually 70 years. The final week would be the final year of those 70 years, or those 70 weeks. It's called weeks here. So you had a 7-year period. When we read in the book of First Maccabees, there was a 7-year period. Half of the week was when the king Antiochus entered into Jerusalem. Half of that week, then 2.5 years, actually, about 3 years later, he set up the abomination of desolation. Then again, 3 years or 3.5 years after that, that's when the temple was cleansed. So when you read the timeline, we could go through it again. In the future, we can actually expand a little bit more. But there was a 7-year period. When you read the book of Maccabees from chapters 1 through 4, that is a span of, when they actually talk about Antiochus going in to Jerusalem, that is a span of 7 years. And within the half of that 7 years is when he set up the abomination of desolation. And again, at the end of that 7 years is when they cleansed the temple on the exact same day. So to answer that question, it is yes. But and that should explain it. But again, there could be more detail that is given as well.
I see here, Binyamin, could this mark the beginning of our Greek-Roman captivity?
Of what we read, yes, that would be no, that's not the beginning of the Greek captivity. The Greek captivity started when Alexander took over after the Persians. So the Greek captivity took place after that. When you continue to read in the book of Maccabees, there came a period of time.
The Greek captivity would have started before that, right?
Well, whenever the Greeks
because
took
Alexander
over,
was about 300 and something. I believe he was about 300 and something BCE, wasn't?
Yeah, he would be around that. He would be around that. Whatever the year was, the Greeks took over the Persians. Because the Greeks, so whatever year that was.
Right.
So if Alexander or if his father Philip, because mentioning, Philip was a very important person in history as well. So if it was Philip that took over the Persian Empire, then it would begin in the time of Philip. But if it was Alexander, then it would begin in the time of Alexander. But whatever period of time the Greeks took over the Persians, that is when the Greek captivity began. But the children of Israel were already in captivity from the time of Babylon. So it just went from whoever was the reigning power at that time, from Babylon to the Medes, to Persia, to the Greeks. Now, the Roman captivity came into effect years after what we read here.
Don't mean to cut you off, 334 BCE.
You talk about for Alexander.
Yeah, in 334 BCE, Alexander invaded Persia, which lay across the Aegean Sea in Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey. After 3 grueling years of warfare and 3 decisive battles, Alexander smashed the Persian armies at the Tigris River and conquered the mighty Persian Empire, including the legendary city of Babylon.
Right. So then, that would be, based on that, I mean, that's just a short summary, because there could be more involved with that. But based on that short summary, Alexander would be the one responsible for having the Greeks take over the entire Persian, or stamping out the Persian Empire pretty much for good, so to speak.
Right, 331 BCE officially.
So that will mark the beginning of the Greek captivity for Israel. Of course, the Greeks and the Persians were battling before that. But the Persians, if they were still in charge of Israel, and that the Greeks at that time, that it wasn't until Alexander that the Greek captivity began. So in the book of Maccabees, and also you read the history in the book of Josephus, there came a period of time where Judah Maccabee made a league with the Romans. Somehow along the way, they lost faith in their own strength, and above all, strength or faith in the Most High, that they were able to continue to win these battles against the Greeks. So what they did was hire out the Romans, because the Romans were up and coming as well, but the Greeks were always able to repel the Romans. So the Romans were not able to go further east to conquer the Greeks and the territories they had, but they were trying. They were up and coming again. They were up and coming kingdom. So Judah Maccabee and the Hasmonean Empire, Hasmonean dynasty, as it began, what they knew is that the Romans were coming up, and what they did was hire the Romans or get in league with the Romans to join forces with the Romans to fight against the Greeks. So what that allowed the Romans to do is have a stronghold or also set up garrisons within Israel. And after a period of time, all the Romans did was just turn against Israel because they already had their foothold in the land. It's like what when the nation of Israel was in league with Syria or the Arameans, as you would read in the Tanakh. And we read about that also in the book of Isaiah chapter 7. And that's what that entire scenario was about, where the southern kingdom hired out the Assyrians to fight against the northern kingdom of Israel and the Syrians. That allowed, so the Assyrians were victorious and eventually sending the northern kingdom into captivity. But again, the Assyrians now had a foothold in the northern part of Israel, right above Judah. So all it took was another generation for the Assyrians to just come back down and take over Judah, which they didn't really do. It was the Babylonians that fulfilled that, but the Assyrians now had that foothold and they were part of that territory at that time.
And I think that's it for questions. I don't see any more questions. This is a very interesting history, so there's so much in it. It's a lot, but it's a lot to cover. One of these years, we need to just go through all the entire books and kind of cover everything so that we could see our faith at the end, which is not a good one, but such as, all right, things they don't discuss in church. He gonna keep coming with questions. Where the Herodians converted Moabites, and as such, ineligible to sit on throne as kings, even though appointed by Roman Senate Mark Antony and Cleopatra.
As far as I know, they were Edomites, actually. I'm not saying that, I'm not ruling out Moabites as part of the entire kingdom itself, but in terms of Herod himself, he was an Edomite, and the family themselves were Edomites. Right. Yeah, they were disqualified from being king over Israel because they were Edomites. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, in short, that would answer the question. Whether Moabite or Edomite, they were ineligible to sit on the throne of Israel.
Either way, that's right.
Yeah. But just to make a correction, he himself was an Edomite.
Okay, then.
And again, there's a lot to cover, as we were just mentioned in the history. I guess, as I said earlier, I apologize for not. If I thought about it earlier, I would have actually thought the presentation earlier, so that way everything would be
on screen. That. You have to finish the slides on that.
But there's a lot of information. It was going to link directly into the book of Daniel, because the book of Daniel is specifically talking about what we read about in every aspect of it. So that would have all tied in.
So maybe that should be the talk next week, as you tying it in.
It could be.
You don't lose focus on. So you not that you're losing focus. I mean, so you could tie it all in off of this week.
And then, so that would be the 17th. And then the 24th, of course, is we're going to have a discussion on Christmas. And
who's going to have a discussion on Christmas?
No, we will.
Oh, we will. Oh, I thought you said you. I thought you said you will have a discussion.
No, I'm saying that we will, on the 24th.
Right. Absolutely.
We'll have a discussion on the rights of, Christmas, where certain customs came from in the history of it. So we'll get into that. Its connection with the Bible, of course. We'll discuss, if it has a connection or not. Because there were many that, even amongst Christians, that don't observe Christmas. So we'll delve into that on the 24th. So yeah, next week, we could continue. We could actually just tie in the book of Daniel with Maccabees. So we'll be out of the Hanukkah season, but we can just have a discussion tying in the book of Daniel with the book of Maccabees, and then after that, have a discussion on Christmas itself.
Hallelujah. So thank you once again, Rabbi. Thank you for your diligence and for your continuing to put in the work. At this time, I'd like to say the words of the blessing, praying that the Creator of heaven and earth will continue to watch over us and bless us. Yevareka Yehovah Yishmareka, Yair Yehovah Panawleka Wikuneka, Yisa Yehovah Panawleka Wayasemlaka Shalom. May Yehovah bless thee and keep thee. May Yehovah make his face to shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. May Yehovah lift up his countenance upon thee and may he grant thee peace. Hallelujah. So don't forget people, don't forget family. On December 24th, we are having an open mic at Congregation Bay D.C.B. Come and join us. Come and enjoy the time with us. That's December 24th. That's a Sunday from 6 p.m., I want to say, until. Come out and enjoy the time with us. Celebrate and have a good time with us. And we pray that the Most High God would allow everybody to be able to come out and enjoy that time with us. This is a fundraiser, so we will be sending food and drinks and things of that sort. We hope that everybody is able to make it out. Also, if you would like to drop any donations, you could hit the QR codes for Cash App or for PayPal. Also for Cash App, if you just want to go directly to the app and you don't know how to do any of this QR code stuff, you just money symbol BEIT DCB. And for PayPal, you could use our email, info@baitdcb.org. That's info@beitdcb.org. That is also our email address. And you can also contribute to us on Zelle at that same email address. Or you could just hit the super chat button right here on the chat. The money symbol, that's the super chat button. And you could donate to us via credit card or debit card, however you feel comfortable doing. So once again, thanking you all for your continued support. And we pray that the Most High God will cause you all to have a safe week. Shalom, shalom. May everyone be blessed. Hallelujah.
Let's get knowledge, wisdom, understanding. We'll do our standing. All praises to the Most High, His laws and commandments. The CHOKMAH BINAH here to push it through your speakers. Judgment, truth, and love should be coming from the leaders. Yeah, knowledge, wisdom, understanding. We'll do our standing. All praises to the Most High, His laws and commandments. The CHOKMAH BINAH here to push